So great is our demand that we're looking for new energy in places once considered sacrosanct. Drilling for natural gas is taking place in George Washington National Forest in Virginia.
It's a trend that more and more local utilities are getting into because they have to protect their pipeline supply in some way. They're going into drilling programs such as this one. They're building synthetic gas plants, importing liquefied natural gas, because for at least the foreseeable future, we don't anticipate any major increase in the pipeline quantity of gas available to us.
But as many wells as may be drilled, the prospect of big strikes on this continent appear remote. While the average well in the Middle East produces 5,000 barrels of oil a day, the best producing wells in the United States provide far less. And proven reserves in the lower 48 states grow smaller every year. Though exploration has been stepped up, production continues to lag. The search goes on elsewhere. We're tapping huge reserves within the Arctic Circle on the north slope of Alaska. Some geologists claim that the world's greatest fossil fuel resources lie beneath ocean waters, in the North Sea, off Indonesia, in the Gulf of Mexico, off the eastern seaboard. But underwater drilling is expensive and risky. Floating platforms are towed out to sea and anchored. Drilling rigs are assembled on them at great cost, and bits are sent 9,000 to 10,000 feet and more deep into the ocean floor. Oil and gas from 18 to 30 wells may pass through one processing rig in a given day for storage, piping, or sending on to land by tanker. Proven pools are being tapped beneath these waters in the Gulf of Mexico. Natural gas from land as well as ocean-based wells is compressed and piped by booster stations across the country from storage facilities mostly based in Louisiana and Texas. But more gas fields must be found and developed if we're to meet our growing needs. On the Rocky Mountains' western slopes, oil shale, oil-filled rock, is being mined and processed in an experimental plant. Though it's now expensive to get crude oil out of the rock, it could someday answer a good portion of our oil needs.
In terms of the reserves available in Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming, they are very large. The high-quality mineable reserves that might be produced in the foreseeable future are also very large. This could be in the range of 5 to 10% of our total liquid fuel requirement.
What about coal? Coal remains one of our greatest resources. There are only two ways to get at it. For generations, we've gone underground to mine it. Much has already been brought to the surface. Far more remains below. Another way to get coal is to strip off a layer of soil and rock. Rich veins of coal, particularly in the west, are there just under the surface. How you get coal, where you use it, how you dispose of the waste, all pose problems. Too often our countryside has been left scarred with mine waste. Those concerned about strip mining warn of land ravaged by bulldozers, stripped of all greenery, once rich plains left desolate. Eastern coal is more likely to pollute the air than western coal, but western coal is far from cities and industrial areas where it's needed. Laws now require anti-pollution devices to screen out more than 99% of the ash and waste that once blackened the air around coal-fired generators. Those who have not complied with such standards in the past must do so in the future, so that dirty coal can be used in a clean way. Then vapors will be no more than steam, which evaporates a few yards away. And strip-mined land can be reclaimed and restored by replacing topsoil and planting trees and grasses.
While we'll never make a forest out of this area, we'll certainly return the land to better shape than we found it before the coal was taken out. It's a grazing area. Several times a year, the flocks of sheep go through here. The antelope congregate in this valley during the winter. They return, and we're very proud of this. They're kind of our pets around here.
It's expected that within a few years, we'll be calling on electricity to supply half of our energy needs. Unless we find new ways to turn our generators, we face serious electricity shortages. And we're approaching the outer limits of production in some areas, as with hydroelectric power.
You are limited as to geography because you have to have a source of falling water. And most of these best sites have already been used. You have to bear in mind, too, that there are problems in balancing whether the hydroelectric capacity should be installed. Because when you build a dam, of course, you have to flood some area, building up the reservoir in back of it. All these things have to be taken into account in a balanced view of the energy and the environmental values to be considered.
Compromises have been worked out which protect our environment at the same time satisfying fuel needs. More than 600 wells on 4 man-made islands in Long Beach Harbor, California, draw oil from pools as far as 4 miles away. Enclosed drilling superstructures actually enhance a city skyline once marked by blackened derricks. That's one way to attack the shortage while protecting the environment. But as with conservation, developing traditional energy resources is not enough. We need new sources. That brings us to our third goal, finding new kinds of energy. There's nuclear power. One theory is that nuclear fusion may be generated by injecting atomic neutral particles into a magnetic field. Still another involves use of laser beams.
Our hope is to demonstrate, or perhaps come up with the invention of the new lasers required to make laser fusion reactors in the early 80s, and perhaps have a prototype reactor going in the 1990s.
Though power generated by nuclear fusion lies in the distant future, power from nuclear fission, the splitting of atoms, already is a fact. But construction delays and the high cost of financing threaten to undermine the United States goal of having half of all electricity supplied by nuclear power by the year 2000. Another proven source for energy is geothermal power, heat beneath the surface of the earth. Commercially feasible plants for generating electricity are already operating at the geysers near San Francisco.
We hope that by the year 2000, we are hopeful that we are going to be able to get on the line maybe as much as 75,000 megawatts. Or, again, with the current rate of consumption, that would supply the needs of 75 million people.
This area is an ideal source to tap for power, but only 4 such fields have yet been found. This one in California, one in Italy, one in Iceland, and one in New Zealand. We're still learning how to explore for geothermal power and how to use it once we find it. Again, the target date for meaningful production beyond what we now have, the next decade. Success has been limited so far in attempts to capture and use the sun's energy directly. But there are an increasing number of solar-heated buildings and homes.
We've been living in solar-heated houses for the past 15 years. Our first winter fuel bill here in Washington, D.C. was only $4.65. We used only 31 gallons of oil for an entire winter, and that was with half our days cloudy and temperatures down well below freezing many times.
The principle of solar heat is quite simple. It works best in areas where most of the days are sunny. Water running through panels is warmed by the sun's rays, heating the house, providing hot water for family use, being stored during the night for use around the clock. Solar heat is practical. It works. But it must be supplemented by traditional energy sources. No real breakthrough has been made in converting solar energy into electric power. Target date for this new development? No year mentioned. Scientists and engineers are engaged in basic research now to find other sources of energy. Wind power, underground coal gasification, breeder reactors, tidal power. But no one presumes to lay down a timetable for achieving man's age-old dream of unlimited energy. The goal seems too remote. For the next 10 years, we must rely on the fossil fuels which have served us in the past. With oil and gas production in this country going down each year, we have no alternative but to conserve. Otherwise, we are faced with a dollar drain that within one short decade could result in concentrating the world's wealth in the Middle East. The oil exporter gets richer, and the oil importer gets poorer, and the consumer pays the bill. Unless we conserve while we look for new energy sources, we face the recurring threat of embargoes, of energy circuits breaking without warning. We must recognize right now that energy will cost us more. That is a fact of life.
I think it's going to end with everybody changing their habits and going back to the things that maybe our parents were used to that we have never seen before.
Just start working now, otherwise we won't have time. We're going to be out of oil within a few years.
People say, well, it's not going to run out in our time, but we have to think of our kids and our kids' kids and how they're going to have to put up with a whole lot of stuff just because we're not careful.
We must change if we're going to have the energy we need. If we want new oil, we've got to look in new places. We must demand more efficient engines for our cars. We must push forward, at whatever cost, the development of new energy resources. We must make personal commitments to cut down wherever we can on the energy we use. Only this can keep the total energy circuit from breaking disastrously for all of us. The energy is here, within this universe, on this planet. It's a challenge facing each of us in all lands, to explore, to find, to develop, and to use wisely, not wastefully, the energy that's here. If we meet this challenge, it will be for the good of all mankind on Earth.